Welcome back to the piano. Let's go ahead and review a little bit of our intervals. Can you find an interval of a third on the piano and try to play all the fingerings and try to do it without looking at your hands? Go ahead and try to do that on your piano. Here is a third on my piano, and here are all of the fingerings. One of the intervals we haven't talked about yet is a fifth. So this is a fifth on my piano. They are 5 steps apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a fifth. And there's only one fingering option since the rest of our fingers are resting on the other notes in between. So another example of a fifth would be from here to here. And another example of a fifth would be from here, F, to here, C. Why don't you take a minute and find a couple intervals of the fifth on your piano? We're going to do 2 intervals and see if we can identify them with our eyes closed. So this would be identifying them by ear. So close your eyes. I'm going to play an interval, and I want you to see if you can identify which interval I'm playing. Close your eyes. I'll play it again. Keep your eyes closed. Go ahead and open your eyes. This is the interval of a second. Let's do one more with our eyes closed. So we're going to identify one more interval by ear. So close your eyes. Keep your eyes closed and listen again. Go ahead and open your eyes, and you can see that this is the interval of a third. We've been learning a song called The Farmhouse together for the last couple lessons. We've learned for our right hand to have our thumb on the middlemost C of our piano, and I've had you learn this part. Watch that again. This is what we've learned together so far. And for our left hand, I've had your thumb on D and your finger on the next C down from our middlemost C. So our hands go just like this. I've had your left hand going back and forth. So now we're going to try putting our right hand and our left hand together. We're going to try to play them at the same time, playing what we have been learning. So watch slowly as I combine both the parts that we've been learning. Do it again. Okay, so here's our right hand. Here's our left hand. And here they are together. We'll review it one more time with both hands together here. We'll stop there and learn more of it the next time we're together. So far, we have learned so much about how the piano produces sound. We've looked inside the piano, we've talked about high pitch and low pitch and middle pitch, and then you learned the names of the sounds. We learned that we use the letters of the alphabet for names of the sounds, and those repeat themselves on the piano. And now you've learned to find the sounds on the piano very quickly. We've done it up by step and down by step and up in thirds and down in thirds. And finally today, we are going to learn how to write the sounds of the piano. So just like when you read or you learn to read, or if you're learning to read, you have heard stories probably most of your life, and then you finally come to a place where you can write the letters that make the words and you can read your stories yourself. So today we're going to begin to learn how to write music. And if you learn how to write the music or notate the music, then you can also learn to read music as well. The sign chosen by musicians to represent a musical sound is simply a line. And if we stack 3 or 4 lines here on top of each other, the distance from one line to the next line is the interval of a third. So here we have simply 4 lines on top of each other. From one line to the next line is a third, to the next line is another third. So all we know about this set of lines, though, is that they picture a set of sounds, each a third apart, but we don't know yet which sounds they are. So if we know one of the sounds, though, on one of the lines, we should be able to figure out the rest of the lines. So let's do that. Let's draw a ladder with 4 lines, and I'm going to tell you that let's pretend the bottom line is the sound of F. So I'll put a little F here. So if we know that this bottom line is F, what is a third? So if you look back at the piano, what is a third above F? So going up on the piano, you find F. Going up on the piano, what is a third above F? And a third above F is A. Okay, so we're going to do that again. We start on A, and if we go up a third, we find C. And once again, if we go up a third from C, we find E. Let's do this one more time, or a few more times, until we are familiar with these ladders, is what I'm going to call them going forward. So let's draw another ladder with 5 lines here and do the same thing again. Here's 5 lines. Let's pretend that this line is D. You can see where I put the D, so it's the second line from the bottom. So let's go up the ladder first. If this line represents D, what is the line above D? So we go back to the piano, we find D on the piano, and what is a third above D? And it's F. What is a third above F? It is A. And what is a third above A? It is C. Okay, so now we're going to go back to D to try to figure out the bottom line of this ladder. So let's go back to D on the piano and go down a third on the piano to figure out the bottom line of the staff. So let's go back to D. If we go down a third, what do we find? And we find B. Hopefully you are seeing the results of working hard over the last couple weeks about going up in thirds and naming sounds on the piano and going down in thirds naming sounds on the piano. Maybe you'll see now why that was such an important exercise for us to master before moving on. Let's go ahead and do another ladder. Keep working through these together. So here's another ladder. Let's do 5 lines again. And let's pretend that the middle line is G. So like we've talked about just a little bit ago, as long as we know the sound on one of the lines, we can figure out the sounds of the rest of the lines. So if we know that this middle line is G, we're going to work our way up the ladder first. So we go to G on the piano and we ask ourselves, what is a third above G? And a third above G is B. What is a third above B? That is D. So now to go down our ladder, let's go back to G and ask ourselves, what is a third below G? We can look at the piano, and if we find G, what is a third below G? And it's E. And a third below E is C. Here's another one. Let's do 5 lines again. And let's label the middle line as A. So to work up our ladder, what is a third above A? It is C. And what is a third above C? It's E. So now let's go back to A so we can work our way down the ladder. So if we find A on the piano again, what is a third below A? It's F. And what is a third below F? It is D. Okay, here's a ladder of 5 lines. Why don't you take a piece of paper and draw 5 lines on your piece of paper, and I am going to tell you that the bottom line represents the sound A. Why don't you go ahead after this, pause the video, and see if you can fill in the rest of the lines. Go ahead and do that now. Hopefully you filled in your lines. So what we knew was that the bottom line represented the letter or the sound A. So we're going to work our way up in thirds. So if we know that the bottom line is A, what is a third above A? It is C. What is a third above C? It's E. A third above E is G. And finally, a third above G is B. So this week, I'm going to tell you for part of your homework to draw ladders and choose any sound on the piano to represent one of these lines, and then go ahead and fill in the rest of the lines. So when I say to draw a ladder, this is what I'm talking about, where you would draw 4 or 5 or 6 lines, and then choose a sound and fill in the rest of the lines, because like we talked, as long as we know one of the lines, one of the sounds that represents one of the lines, then we can figure out the rest of the lines. So we just learned about how the sounds of the pitch are pictured. We're learning that we need something on the piano that tells us which sounds to play. So not only do we know now which sounds to play, we have to learn how long to hold these sounds. We've talked about 1 pulse, 2 pulse, 3 pulse, and 4 pulse sounds. So how do we know which sounds come first and which ones come next? Do we play all of the sounds at once, or do we play them one at a time? We have to have some way of knowing which sounds to play and how long to hold those sounds. If we have a simple tune like this, we know know, not all of those sounds were the same length. Some were one pulse and some were two pulse. So now today we're going to start talking about how do we notate, or how do we write, or how do we draw a one pulse sound versus a two pulse sound.
We make a picture of a one pulse sound like this. And here's our time name underneath. So a picture of a one pulse sound is called a note. We have sang one pulse sounds many times in the past. So if I was going to sing a one pulse sound, I would simply sing ta, 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 ta. So to make pictures or notes, a series of notes, we would simply draw a number of notes in a row. So here are 6 one pulse notes. So to sing these, I would sing ta, 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 ta. So these are what one pulse notes look like. We also learned many lessons ago that we have strong accented pulses and weak pulses. So we mark the strong accent by drawing a line that we would call a bar line. So this bar line is what tells us there's a strong accent that's coming again. In this little line of notes, we're going to have two pulse measures. So I'm going to put another bar line after every 2 pulses. So we have 2 pulses in between those 2 bar lines. I'm going to put another bar line after 2 more pulses, and we finally end with 2 pulses and add another bar line. So in between each bar line is a measure. We talked a little while ago how these strong accented pulses measure out our music, because those strong accented pulses, they come regularly in music. So if I was going to sing these notes, I would sing ta, 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 ta. So you probably heard how the first pulse in each of these measures was just a little bit stronger than the second pulse, which is the weak pulse. So these are our one pulse sounds. Let's go ahead and put these back up. So how do we make two pulse sounds? There's a couple ways to make two pulse sounds, and one way is to draw a curved line underneath these one pulse sounds and connect them together with what we call the tie. So here's another tie, and I'm simply tying these one pulse sounds together to make them into two pulse sounds. Here's another tie. So I've tied all the one pulse sounds together to another one pulse sound, and so now we have two pulse sounds. So let's put their time names underneath. And to sing this, I would sing ta, ta, ta. So there's some two pulse sounds. There's also another way to write a two pulse sound, and that is this symbol, this new one that you see where the middle is not quite filled in. So that is a symbol specifically for a two pulse sound. So what you see right now are two different ways to write two pulse sounds. Let's go ahead and look at a few two pulse sounds. So just like with one pulse sounds, we have bar lines to create measures. So I'm going to create 3 measures with 3 two pulse sounds, and I put their time names underneath it. So these are two pulse sounds. To sing these two pulse sounds, I would sing ta, ta, ta. Let's go on and look at a series of one pulse and two pulse sounds. So this is what we would call a rhythm, which is a pattern of one pulse and two pulse sounds. So to sing this rhythm, I would sing ta, 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 ta. Okay? Let's do that one more time so you can follow along with these one pulse and two pulse sounds. So to sing this rhythm, I would sing ta, 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 ta. Let's move on to a time dictation. We've done something like this in the past where I would play a rhythm on the piano and you would write out the tas that go with that rhythm. So once again, we're going to listen to one pulse and two pulse sounds in a melody that I'm going to play. But I'm going to play a melody or a little song, but we're going to listen for the one pulse and the two pulse notes, and then we're going to write out the rhythm that we hear. So first, let's just listen to the melody. You don't need to write anything down. We're going to work through this one measure at a time. So here is the melody. Like I said, just listen. Just listen for one pulse and two pulse sounds. To begin this, I'm going to make 4 measures because this melody is 4 measures long and there are 4 pulses in each measure. So to begin this, I'm going to put some bar lines up to begin writing out my 4 measures. So this melody is 4 measures long with 4 pulses in each measure. I'm going to play the entire melody one more time and then we're going to work through it one measure at a time. So here's the entire melody. Let's just listen again. Listen for one pulse and two pulse sounds. Here's the melody again. So let's begin looking at the first measure. So there's 4 pulses in the first measure. I'm going to play just the first measure. So that's the first measure. Why don't you listen again to it? Listen for one pulse and two pulse sounds. So when I listen, I hear ta, ta, ta. Okay, listen again to the first measure of this melody. Ta, ta, ta. Do you hear that? Listen one more time and then let's try writing out the notes, writing out the rhythm that we hear. Okay, so I hear ta, ta, ta. To write that out, I would write a one pulse sound, another one pulse sound, and then a two pulse sound. So this would be the first measure of our dictation. So listen to the first measure again and see if you hear this rhythm. Okay, so we have a one pulse sound, a one pulse sound, and a two pulse sound. So let's go on to the second measure. So here's the second measure. Let's listen again to the second measure. I hear ta, ta, ta. Listen again. What do you hear? Ta, ta, ta. Okay, so once again, we have a one pulse sound, a one pulse sound, and a two pulse sound. So let's listen to that second measure. Here's the second measure again. So that's the rhythm of our second measure. So let's go on to our third measure. Here's our third measure. Let's listen again. Ta, 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 ta. Is that what you hear? Listen again. So our third measure, all we hear are one pulse sounds. Listen again and then I'll write them out. Here's our third measure. Ta, 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 ta. So let's write in 4 one pulse sounds. So there's our third measure. So now let's listen to the last measure. Listen again. I hear ta, ta, ta. Let's listen. ta, ta, ta. Here it is, one more time. Ta, ta, ta. So this is what I hear. 2 one-pulse sounds and a 2-pulse sound. So now that I've written it, see, I'm going to play it again. See if you hear that. Okay, so now I've written out the rhythm of this melody. So let's go back and listen to this whole melody. Okay, this is what we would call a time dictation. Let's listen to that melody one more time as you follow along with the notes that we just wrote.
Until we meet again, I want you to work on 3 things. First of all, draw some ladders like we worked on in our lesson today. Just draw some ladders of 3 to 6 lines and choose any sound on the piano to name or label one of those lines. And like we learned, as long as we know one line, we will know the rest of the lines, or we'll be able to figure out the rest of the lines. Also, work on drawing 1-pulse and 2-pulse notes. And here's an example of what I want you to do this week, where you draw a line on a piece of paper and measure out a couple measures, and then fill in those measures with some different combinations of 1-pulse and 2-pulse notes. And last, I want you to continue working on the farmhouse song that we are learning together.